Channel 16, your Fairfax County government channel. You're watching Channel 16, your Fairfax County government channel. On the Beat, Fridays at 1 p.m. and Saturdays at 8 p.m. on Fairfax County Government, Channel 16.
Hello again. I'm Braddock Supervisor John Cook. Welcome back to Braddock Neighborhood News, the program I am using to provide you with information on issues facing our community and ideas on how we can strengthen our neighborhoods. Although we live in what seems like a fast-paced, bustling area, we forget that Fairfax is also home to a wide range of animals. With a very diverse geographical setting like ours, it is quite a challenge to manage all the aspects of animals in the county. Joining me today are Dr. Katie Edwards, our County Wildlife Management Specialist, and Barbara Hutcherson, the Acting Director of the Fairfax County Animal Shelter. Well, Katie, Barb, thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks for having us. Happy to be here.
So let's talk about a little bit about what you do. Katie, you're our wildlife specialist, and when we talk about wildlife in Fairfax, we're not talking about nightlife, although we could, but we're talking about animals, and there's a lot of activity that goes on.
Yes, that's correct. We have a very diverse population of wildlife in the community. Deer, geese, raccoons, foxes, you name it. Lots of animals that inhabit our county along with our residents. The Wildlife Management Office works as a part of the Animal Services Division of the Police Department. We're really responsible for implementing policies and programs throughout the county, including the Deer Management Program, Canada Geese, Resident Canada Geese Management Program, as well as dealing with other wildlife issues. As a wildlife biologist, most people think a lot of my time is actually spent out in the woods and surveying and monitoring animals, but the majority of my time is actually spent dealing with communities and helping to address urban wildlife conflicts in their properties and within their neighborhoods.
And we're going to talk about some of those in a little bit, but let's talk to Barb. You help us by running the shelter, and we've got a great one, so tell us about it.
We do. We have a wonderful animal shelter here in Fairfax. I'm currently the Acting Director of the Fairfax County Animal Shelter. We are open access municipal shelter covering all of Fairfax County, one location. We take in between 4,500, 5,000 animals a year. We return many of those, high number of our stray animals to their owners, and we adopt out last year almost 3,000 animals total. So I oversee all of the adoptions and the enrichment programs and the fostering and all the great things we do at the shelter.
Great. Now, what kind of animals can you adopt from the shelter?
The obvious, dogs and cats. We always have lots and lots of those. We also get all kinds of, we call them small animals or critters. We have sometimes mice, sometimes gerbils, hamsters, ferrets, plenty of rabbits, guinea pigs. Guinea pigs have gotten to be really increasingly popular, actually.
Especially with the dogs. But
yeah, we try to avoid that happening.
Yeah.
They have their own room, and we keep that closely monitored. We have snakes sometimes, certain kinds of snakes that are allowed to be adopted out, and that's the bulk of it.
And where do these animals come from when they come to you?
From the community, people in the community who can no longer care for their pets. That's almost 100% of what we bring in.
Okay, so it's all people either dropping off animals to the shelter or animals being picked up because they've somehow gotten disconnected with an owner.
Correct. Some stray animals that somebody's called in, hey, there's a dog trotting down my sidewalk, no person in sight. Or people coming to us to say, hey, I need help, I can't care for my pet any longer, and we're there to help them. If we can't provide them resources to help them be able to care for their pet, then we take it in and find it a new home.
And so all the animals you just listed, dogs, cats, rabbits, guinea pigs and such, are all eligible for adoption.
Correct.
And Katie, we know we've got a lot of other animals out there that we don't adopt because they kind of like to hang out on their own. In my district, it's foxes, but there are others as well. But tell us about some of the major ones that you hear about and what we need to know about them.
Well, you just named it. The #1 call I get for wildlife is red foxes on property. So people just calling because they see an animal cross their property. They want to know what normal behavior is. Am I safe? Is my pet safe? And how can I minimize any conflicts with animals? We get a lot of calls about raccoons getting into garbage cans, raccoons in chimneys. Beavers impounding floodplains or stormwater ponds, calls about possums, skunks, rabbits, you name it.
Well, let's talk about fox because I know we have a lot of those. And they're fascinating to watch. I'm amazed how high they can jump. They can scale. They can jump over our 6-foot fence, which amazes me. But some people, they are afraid of the fox and they want somebody to come and sort of take it out, and we don't do that, and let's talk about why that is.
Well, in most cases, having a fox on your property is not really a cause for alarm. Typically, they're more shy and wary animals, but we do see instances where foxes can be more bold. People will call in saying there's a fox watching them on their property or coming close to their deck or their patio, watching their animals play in the yard, and it's really unnerving to a lot of people. Most of that activity stems from being in close contact with people without any negative consequences, usually in the form of animals attracted to food on the property. So being able to just remove food attractants and suitable denning areas on your property will help to minimize any conflicts that you have with these animals. We get a lot of calls about vocalizations, wondering what's that noise I'm hearing in the woods at night. Most often it's red fox, but just trying to talk to people about different exclusionary measures they can take on their property if they don't want to have wildlife in close proximity.
You mentioned denning, and I know we can get that. Even on a 1/4-acre lot, if you've got a pile of sticks in the back or a wood pile or something, that can turn into a fox den.
Sure.
And what should people do if they find a den in their yard? Because that's probably not a good thing to have.
If they find an active den on their yard, we typically try to advise and promote tolerance and coexistence until the fox kits are old enough to disperse and move out on their own. Just monitoring that area, keeping pets away from that area so they're not getting into any tangles with the foxes. Once the animals have moved on, we recommend sealing up that entrance. Foxes will use burrows from other animals. They really like to use groundhog burrows on properties, and they can also get into crawl spaces. So once the kits and the parents have moved out, sealing up any of those areas so that they don't come back next year.
And going near the kits is a bad idea.
Yeah, we just recommend in general with most wildlife, stay a safe distance. Don't let your pets roam unattended so that they're not getting into any fights with any animals that may be protective of their young or acting defensively.
I think it's fair to say, right, that most wild animals, certainly the smaller ones we're talking about, in general are afraid of people. They're going to run away if you approach them.
That's right.
But if you're near their kits with a fox, then they're going to fight back.
They're good parents. Most wildlife, are good moms, and they want to protect their young. So we just ask people to kind of keep a distance, admire it from afar, but not get too close. Do not handle any wild animals. Keep your pets up to date on their vaccinations so that if they do get into a tangle again, they're not being exposed to anything. But just usually making noises, even just clapping and yelling, banging pots and pans, or you can get noisemakers, even shooting a water hose in the direction of the animal. These are all general scare tactics that you can use to harass an animal and hopefully get it to move on its own.
You mentioned not touching animals. That's true of birds' nests too, and people don't always realize that.
That is somewhat of an old wives' tale where, a lot of people say if you handle a baby animal, the parents will automatically reject it. In some cases that's true, but in a lot of cases animals can be reunited if they are displaced from their nest or from a den or left behind. So we ask people, if you do find baby animals, to call and talk to a wildlife professional or rehabilitator for advice before touching anything. But we do ask people not to handle wild animals because it's safer for them, especially with any potential disease transmission, any injuries, and it's better for the animal itself.
Is that true of birds' nests too? Because I know a lot of people will find a bird's nest and say, oh, I'll move it to a different tree, I'll find a better place.
Yeah, we recommend just leaving things as they are. It was put there for a reason,
right.
And just let nature take its course and admire it from afar.
Now I heard, and I didn't know this, but I heard we've had some bears in the county. So I said, I got to ask you about the bears because we don't really expect that. So they're not walking on middle of Braddock Road,
No.
but they are out there in the woods, I guess, a little bit.
Yeah, we do have occasional sightings, primarily during the spring and summer. These are times in early spring and late summer where food resources are naturally depleted. So in cases during that time of year, we may have young yearling bears seeking out food in more populated residential areas. And that's what we see in the county, is just occasional sightings throughout, usually in neighborhoods that are kind of bordering our stream valleys and larger parks. And they get into some trouble on private properties by knocking over garbage, getting into bird seed. They really love to take down bird feeders, so be careful if you do have those and keep an eye on them. But most of the times there's no actual incident or safety issue associated with bears. They're just passing through the area and looking for unsecured food sources.
Right. We're going to come back to a couple other animals, but I want to come over and talk to Barbara a bit because as people bring animals to the shelter, sometimes it's because they have found that the animals are more difficult to take care of than they thought.
Sure.
And maybe, for example, in the case of a dog, maybe the dog has bitten or the dog has been a little tougher than they thought. Tell us how you handle it. You're able to do some training with these animals.
We are. We have a lot of resources. We have an experienced caretaking staff who handles the animals every day, and they record copious notes about how the animals are behaving in the shelter. We get as much information as possible from the folks surrendering the animals. And then we have some volunteer trainers. These are people who are certified trainers who will come in and give us some evaluations and work with the animals. And on top of that, we have some really wonderfully dedicated and talented foster homes that can take some of our more difficult cases, take them home and work with them and see if, you know what, this was something we can work through and this dog is safe to place, and we can do that. And then sometimes, you know, it has to go the other way and we decide, you know, this, based on the history and the current behavior, we don't feel comfortable placing this animal in the shelter. But it's always a team effort, and we have lots of trained folks who work together to come to that decision.
And if you come to the shelter to adopt an animal, you'll be given sort of a history.
Yeah,
so
we will tell
know.
you absolutely everything we know about the animal. We have a whole set of notes in our animal database, and part of the adoption process is the adopter is given access to every word of that. So everything that we have recorded, you know, that Fido did in his time with us, the adopter can find out about. You know, we really want to make the best matches. It's in all of our interests that the animal is placed with the right home. It's in the animal's interest and the human's interest. So we work really hard to make sure we give all that information and help people come to the best decision.
Now you mentioned a whole lot of different kinds of animals you have there, which was surprising.
Right.
Everything from mice to rabbits and everything else. Do they all get placed? And if not, what happens?
Yeah, we are very fortunate at Fairfax. For several years now, we have not had to euthanize any animals for lack of space. So we do get them all eventually placed. If we're having a hard time getting them adopted through traditional routes, we have rescue partners to whom we can transfer animals. And that's for small animals and reptiles and dogs and cats. So that's one avenue that we can use to get some of our harder to place ones in homes. But we eventually, if it's an adoptable animal, we can get it in a home.
And people should know that if they come to the shelter, adopt an animal, it's had its shots, it's cleaned up, it doesn't have flea issues, you take care of all that stuff.
We have an intake process that involves deworming for all the animals. We do a flea and tick prevention, heartworm prevention. They get rabies vaccines if they haven't already had them on record. They get distemper vaccines, whatever age-appropriate vaccines an animal should have. We do all of that when they come into the shelter, and we give the records to the adopter. We also spay neuter, super important. We spay neuter everything. Well, not guinea pigs and we do rabbits. We spay neuter our rabbits now before they go home.
Holy cow.
And dogs and cats, all those three species get spayed or neutered before they leave the shelter. Generally, they get spayed or neutered before they're even made available for adoption.
Right. Now, Katie, though, in the wild, of course, we're not able to make sure that every animal is healthy before we come into contact with it. What should people be looking out for as far as, rabid animals or animals that are going to sort of be extra unsafe? What are the signs of that?
In terms of an animal that might have rabies or potentially be sick, you're looking for an animal that is staggering, may appear like it's wobbly or drunk, disoriented, is vocalizing abnormally, isn't really responding to normal stimuli. signals like that would be something that you would want to call in and talk to animal control to see if they need to come out and investigate that animal is being sick or injured. In terms of younger wildlife, we get a lot of calls, especially during the spring and summer, about animals that are perceived as being orphaned or abandoned. Signs you would look for in those cases are younger animals that may not be furred or feathered, may have obvious injuries such as bleeding and broken bones. If any animal's brought to you by your dog or cat, you would want to call it in as a potential injury. And then animals that may have heavy parasite loads, worms, maggots, flies, that kind of things that you would look for to indicate a sick animal.
And what do you do if somebody calls in for a sick animal? And we'll talk about rabies and what somebody has to do if they're bitten in a second, but somebody calls in and says, you know, there's abandoned fox kits, or there's an injured beaver. What do you do with that call?
That we would refer to animal control, and they can be reached through the police non-emergency line. That would go to a dispatch to connect the resident with animal control officer, and then they would actually respond on scene to investigate that animal and determine, you know, if it's sick or injured, and what route to take after that, depending on the circumstance.
And what would they do with that animal?
It depends. They may capture it. It may be taken and connected with a wildlife rehabilitator, or in some cases, depending on the extent, the animal may have to be euthanized.
But a healthy wild animal, we ask people not to call in, right?
Healthy wildlife, if it's just animals that you consider to be a nuisance, the county does not respond to that. That would be directed through my office, where we can talk about tolerance measures, harassment, exclusion measures to get them to move off the property on their own. If that doesn't work, or if the resident wants the animal removed, they would need to contact a local critter control company or a licensed trapper through the state.
That's right, and that's important for people to realize. At least on your own property, you have the right to remove animal. Not when it's on a park property or VDOT right of way. That's a little different. I remember last year we had a 5-gallon wasp nest over the VDOT right of way. It caused some concern for people in the neighborhood. It was big, but tell us about why we don't respond there.
Yeah, I mean, if there is a health or a safety threat, the county will respond to those instances. But for the most part, we just ask people to tolerate it and coexist with wildlife. I mean, they're a part of our community as well. You know, some people call in and they want more wildlife and more viewing opportunities, and then others, you know, are nervous about having wildlife on their property, or they're getting into trouble or causing property damage and want them excluded. So we work with both sides of that to try and just educate the public and provide outreach and technical assistance on what they can do in either of those circumstances relating to the wildlife.
Right. Well, we talked about fox, we talked about bears, coyotes. I know in some parts of the county, certainly in the eastern part of my district near Lake Accotink, we know we have them. Every once in a while you hear something at night and you go, I wonder. But tell us about coyotes.
Coyotes are widespread throughout the county. They've been here for a number of years, and they're really kind of an established part of the wildlife community in Fairfax County now. We do not have an active management plan for them. Right now we're just focusing on education and awareness so that people know that there are coyotes here. We are receiving some increased sightings within residential communities. This could be because the coyote population is increasing. We don't really know. It also could be just people are more aware of it and they're more knowledgeable and know what to look for, so they're seeing them more often. But you know, we are seeing them. We're just asking people to be proactive and implementing preventative measures on their property. So securing your garbage, removing pet food outside, you know, removing bird feeders that may attract a prey base for coyotes and bringing them into the yards, and then just again, pet safety, not letting your animals roam unattended.
I was going to mention that. Don't let your Chihuahua out at night alone.
Keeping your cats indoors. Small dogs can be seen and cats as prey. Coyotes are also territorial, so in some cases they may see larger dogs as competition. So again, just leash walking your dogs, maintaining oversight over them so that they're not getting into any dangerous situation if a coyote is encountered.
Now, this is an important point, though, because I mean, generally, if you have a fenced-in yard, we like the idea of let your dogs out, let them play in the yard. So, what would be the sort of the signs of a coyote, or do you have to actually see one or more than one? And when should people say, "Gee, I would like I would let my dog out in the yard, but I'm not going to, or I shouldn't because of possible coyote sightings?
Most often you're not going to have an encounter with a coyote. They're most active at night and early morning hours. So depending on if you're leaving your animals out overnight, I would, recommend against that and keeping them inside with you, especially at night. But in terms of signs, it's very hard to say. I mean, some people see them moving through, but they're not permanently set up in many of our communities. Finding scat or tracks would be a signal that they've come through your area, but again, it may not be a resident coyote in your neighborhood. So just being aware of what to look for and knowing that they may be out there. In terms of fencing, it's really hard to create a 100% coyote-proof fence.
They can jump,
they can
too.
climb, they can dig. So there are models out there that you can create. They make roller bars that you can put on top of the fence to keep them, and burying the fence underneath to keep them from digging under. So there are different patterns if you want to install a fence to deter coyotes, but a lot of that really just depends on the situation. They're not 100%.
Right. So we've talked about the animals that we keep wild. Barb, we talked about sort of the standard pets, the ones we're kind of used to, but there's a number of other animals that we're allowed to have as pets here in the county, in addition to dogs and cats and rabbits and guinea pigs. So let's talk about what some of those are and aren't, because some people think in terms of birds and potbelly pigs and chickens, and we allow some and not others.
Right. So the ones that you get asked about most frequently, the ones I get asked about most frequently, are hedgehogs, chinchillas, and sugar gliders. None of those are allowed. They are considered wild, exotic pets, and county code prohibits those. So county code prohibits anything that is exotic that would normally be found in the wild to be kept as pets. So no little monkeys, none of those things. The dogs, cats, of course, rabbits, guinea pigs, ferrets are fine. They are allowed. Most of the rodents, that as long as they were born in captivity, you're not supposed to go and catch them and keep them as pets. Those are fine. And bird species, the same. Species that are born in captivity. Your parakeets and your budgies and your parrots, that's all fine. But capturing a bird in the yard and making it a pet is not okay.
No, wildlife can't be kept as pets.
Right. So just in general, wildlife can't be kept as pets. But those top three are the ones that people are typically concerned about: is hedgehogs, sugar gliders, and chinchillas. And some of the other localities do allow them, so people should always check with their local government.
There you go. Let's talk about how people can volunteer, especially at the shelter, to help out with animals. We've got a lot of opportunities there.
We do. We have a website, and on our website there's a link for volunteerism, and you can go there and find out what we have available. We have an amazing volunteer force. They logged over 35,000 hours last year at the shelter. We're always expanding. We're currently focusing a little bit on some of the opportunities out in the community to go and talk to people about the shelter and share what we're doing there and get more people interested in coming in and adopting. But we have dog walkers there from opening to closing every day. We have cat room socializers. We have kids programs that are going on now. We have kids reading to animals a couple times a week in the evening. So volunteers run that. They run tours for kids and adults. We have a pet prep camp that we started last summer that will be continuing this year. We have birthday parties that volunteers run. Kids can host their birthday party at the shelter if they would like, get to visit with some animals.
Great. Katie, we've only got a minute left, but what's sort of the top message that we want to give to people about wildlife and what they should be thinking about?
Just to be tolerant and realize these are our wild neighbors. They're a part of the community, and if you have questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to my office or animal control to discuss what you should be expecting on your properties and ways to encourage wildlife or deter wildlife depending on the situation. But in most cases, it's not a cause for alarm, and they're a part of our community.
And if we do have, let's say, an accident, especially in our cars with an animal, we should call that in.
Yes, please report anything. If you come into contact with wildlife, if there's ever animals acting aggressively or creating a safety or a health concern, please call that in through the police non-emergency number so that we can have animal control investigate that.
Barb, we got the last word about animal shelters, pets. What's the big message?
The big message is come see what we're doing. We want to be a resource center for the community. We want to be a place where people come to adopt their pets, but we also want to be a place where people come to get help solving problems with pets and to get involved and to be part of the community. So come visit. That's our
And we have a new building, we expanded, we've got good stuff
yes,
there.
it's a happy place. The volunteers are happy, the animals are happy. If you have an image in your head of this sad, dirty, smelly, depressing place, you need to come see us because it's something entirely different.
It's not like late night TV, it's a whole lot better.
That's right, that's right.
That's great. Well, I'd like to thank Katie and Barb for joining me today and for the work they do helping to maintain a healthy wildlife population, as well as taking care of our little friends who are looking for a home. I hope you've enjoyed this segment of Braddock Neighborhood News. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, comments, or other needs, please contact my office at 703-425-9300 or email braddock@fairfaxcounty.gov. Tune in next month for another edition, and please remember to look for ways to volunteer. Your community needs you.